In this part of our tutorial, we will introduce the Boolean arrays in iOS. So we're going to do that by declaring and initializing an array of Booleans. So we're going to assign a name, and then we're going to populate the array of Booleans with some Boolean values, just to show you exactly what a list of Booleans could look like. Okay, so now that we know what a basic array is, let's take a look at an array of Booleans. So just to give a quick recap, a Boolean is a variable, so let's call this one isTrue, that can take on either a true or false value. So it can either be true or it can be false. In this case, it's called isTrue, so let's just keep it as true. So this is just declaring and initializing a single Boolean value. We've created one, and it's of type Boolean, and we've given it the value true. Okay, so that's a single variable. Now perhaps we want a list of them. Let's consider a true or false test where there's a few different answers, or a few different questions rather, and the answers are either true or false. So this would be a list of Booleans. Now in order to create such a list, we would first declare the type Boolean, and then to signify that it's a list, we give it the square braces. So this just means that it's an array of Booleans rather than a single Boolean value. And that's following the train of thought of the true or false test. Let's call this true false test. Okay, so if we put the semicolon there, we're just ending this. Oops, don't need that there. So now we have not created the object, but we've declared true or false test to be a Boolean array, or a list of Booleans. Now, this hasn't actually created the object yet. When we did this with a single variable, this would have created the object. However, because arrays are a class of their own, if we want to create one, we have to call the new operator. So we can do that a few ways. We can declare it straight up here, so we could say new Boolean array and give it a size. So let's say there are maybe only 5 questions in this test. Okay, so this is just declaring and initializing a Boolean array called true false test, and we're giving it 5 variables, 5 Boolean variables. Okay, so we can either do it here, or we can, I'm just going to copy this, okay, get rid of that, and we could also declare it elsewhere. So we could call it down here. So true false test is a new Boolean array with 5 Boolean variables. So this is a list, like with a single variable declaration, we could have just declared it up here and then said is true equals true. It's the same basic thing, except that with the arrays we have to call the new operator, because if we just did this, then we get an error saying invalid term bool. We need new. Okay? And let's just give this back the value of true. Now, if we do this, all we've done is we have declared and initialized the Boolean array, but we've declared it, but we haven't initialized it, so we haven't given it any specific values yet. Now, we can do this in one of 2 ways. I'm just going to call this up here, so I'm going to take that, I'm going to cut it, and I'm just going to put it up here, and I'm going to get rid of this. Just kind of want to do everything in one place up here rather than having it separated. So what we can do is we can put some values right in if we want. So we can say true, false, true, false, true. And this just initializes our array. So before we just had a declaration, we just had the size of the array and the type of the array and the name. Now we're actually giving it some specific values. And again, they're Booleans, so they're all either true or false. Now we can either do it this way, where we have the size and the values, or we don't even have to include a size at all. But if you do want to include a size, bear in mind that it cannot be the wrong size. So for example, if we put in a 3 here and then had 5 values, that's not okay. That's showing us an error saying the array initializer of length 3 is expected. Same with if we did 7, then we don't have enough and we'd have to add 2 more values or change the size of this array. So that's pretty much it for Boolean arrays. Not so different from declaring a single Boolean value. Just think of declaring many at once, and remember we need this new operator when we're creating an array of any kind. In this part of our tutorial we introduced Boolean arrays in iOS. So we did that by creating an array of Boolean values, and we called it a true or false test. Because this might be one way to represent a true or false test in a computer. It's just an array of Boolean values, each with either a true or a false. So by now you should be able to create a Boolean array and populate it with Boolean values. I showed you a couple of ways to do this where you could either specify a size or not.